Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome into another episode of Inside the Hoosier Mind. I am Tony. I am back. It was an exciting weekend of not only college football but NFL football. There's a lot of highs, there's a lot of lows, there's some greatness, there's some disappointment, and we're gonna jump right into it with pretty much all of it. Pretty jam-packed show today. Let's get started with pretty much the biggest elephant in the room, with Colorado having obliterated the Colorado Buffaloes, Oregon having obliterated the Colorado Buffaloes. And this was a game that I actually talked with Trey Larkins on another sports network, Wise Guys Radio. We actually talked about this because he asked me what was, Colorado's chances of being able to beat Oregon. I said they weren't very high. And the reason why I say that is whenever you look at Colorado as a whole, Colorado is actually a very small team as far as their overall size and build of their players. They're extremely small. And then you look at Oregon, especially with Dan Lanning having taken over there, they have a very SEC style build to them. A lot of their players are extremely big. They have big offensive linemen, big quarterback, big defense. So when you looked at the overall score and the gameplay against Colorado, Oregon was able to, essentially just bully Colorado into doing whatever they wanted to do. Now, I did think that Oregon would potentially struggle a little bit more against Colorado than what they did, specifically because of how poorly they did against Texas Tech just a couple of weeks ago. They were able to, of course, beat up on Portland State. They were able to beat up on another Group 5 school that they ended up playing, but that's kind of to be expected. Against Power 5 opponents, it seemed as if Oregon was struggling a little bit more. But of course, Oregon comes away with the win 42-6. And then when you look at the no overall numbers that Colorado had compared to Oregon, Colorado only had 199 total yards. They had 13 first downs. Shedeur Sanders won 23 of 33, 159 passing yards, one touchdown, and he had 31 yards on 5 carries, essentially. Overall, they rushed for 40 as a whole out of 25 attempts. So not only that, Colorado also showed that they were pretty undisciplined, which is pretty surprising coming from a Deion Sanders coach team. And especially with how they performed the first few weeks, this is a pretty disciplined Colorado group. All the way up until last week against Colorado State, they didn't really do so hot. They had 12 penalties this game with 106 penalty yards out of it. Oregon also not as disciplined. They had 9 penalties for 80 yards, and Oregon also ended up throwing an interception by Bo Nix. So this just overall was a pretty bad look, but it did give us a better insight into what is the true, Deion Sanders Colorado Buffaloes going to look like going into the future against, truly good teams. And that's not a knock against TCU. It's TCU's very first game. I think a lot of people, including TCU, kind of undervalued and underestimated Colorado, and the fact that they didn't take them seriously. They didn't think that Colorado was going to be able to do that well. Come to find out, Colorado did a lot better than they expected. And this is also a TCU team that they lost a lot of key players in the draft. Quentin Johnson getting drafted in the first round. Max Duggan is no longer their quarterback. He had the really good Cinderella story for them as well. So there is a lot that honestly happened for TCU that kind of really would shock TCU and shock anybody for it being the first game of the season. Then Colorado rolls over a pretty beaten up and bad Nebraska team that Matt Rhule is trying to fix after Scott Frost and after years and years of just, bad mismanagement, not for lack of talent, because Nebraska is able to get the talent that they need. It's just they can't make everything click together. Colorado is able to take advantage of that through, chemistry, just through overall star players that they have with Shedeur and Travis Hunter. Of course, they're able to end up coming out beating Colorado State, which again, that game, the Colorado State game, is where I saw more of the size disadvantage, because you looked at Colorado State, the fact that Colorado State was making Shedeur Sanders uncomfortable, the fact that they were forcing him out of the pocket, he was having to go on the run to make plays. That was a pretty key moment for Colorado State, for me, looking at it, because I'm like, I don't know if they're going to be able to truly hang with the Oregons. I don't know if they're going to truly be able to, keep up with the Utahs. Now, I think offensively, they're going to potentially be able to do it just because of Shedeur's ability to extend the play. I don't know if defensively they're going to be able to handle that, because they're undersized on defense as well. So looking ahead now, they're going to be taking on USC, another top perennial team, a team that's actually, favored to, make a very deep run in the playoffs. The only advantage to me that Colorado has in this is the fact that USC has an extremely weak defense. I mean, a wet paper bag is almost stronger than USC's defense, and that's unfortunately no joke. Offensively, USC should be able to score pretty much at will, but will Colorado be able to even get a stop, as well as, can this Colorado offense continue to function, especially with Travis Hunter missing? I mean, don't get it twisted. Travis Hunter is a great player. He's, one of the heartbeats and souls of that offense. But like Coach Prime said when Travis Hunter actually came out and said that he wanted to play, he's like, I have to be out there. He said, don't worry about that. He said, this is not on you. This is not your job. You're the guy that goes out and makes plays. You have an extremely bright future. This is my problem to worry about. You focus on getting better, which shows a lot to who Prime is as not only as a coach, but it also shows a lot to who Prime is as, essentially a dad, because he sees all of these guys on his team as his kids. And therefore, he's taking a more fatherly role for them. I expect USC to pretty much roll Colorado in this. I think it will be closer than the Oregon game, just because now Colorado pretty much got a taste of defeat. So now it's the true test for Colorado of how do you bounce back from any type of adversity? How do you climb back on the mountain to try to rectify that mistake? Now, even if it is ending in another loss, can you at least make it more competitive than what you did against an Oregon team that just flat out embarrassed you? So that's going to be one of the big college games to watch this weekend, as well as you're going to have number 24 Kansas going to number 3 Texas. That's going to be a fantastic game to watch. I can't wait to watch that one. You're also going to have number 13 LSU at number 20 Ole Miss. And really, that's about it as far as the big games. You are going to technically have number 11 Notre Dame at number 17 Duke. And then for any of my SEC fans, you're going to have South Carolina at number 21 Tennessee. Tennessee, falling off quite a bit there because of the loss to Florida. And there's a lot of high expectations for Tennessee, but I will say they also had a lot of people drafted. I remember watching Joe Milton at Michigan. He's not bad. He does have a very big arm. He can throw it, but just because you can, hawk the ball all the way to the other end zone doesn't always necessarily mean that you're going to be guaranteed to win. Another game actually for Friday night, if anybody is interested, especially for any Pac-12 fans, number 10 Utah is going to go face number 19 Oregon State. Also a fantastic game. Oregon State actually ended up laying a goose egg against Washington State. Washington State was able to roll pretty wholeheartedly against them, and it ended up actually being a lot better game than what people probably expected from the two remaining teams out of the now currently Pac-2. One of the other games that actually took place last week that was the nighttime game, probably one of the, depending on who you are, you could say it's either one of the best or one of the worst games that took place that night. Ohio State against Notre Dame. It was not a high scoring game at all. It was actually a pretty ugly game for the most part. And of course, Ohio State ended up coming away with the victory, 17-14 against Notre Dame, which I don't think anybody was necessarily surprised at. I will say I was a little surprised. I expected Notre Dame to actually come out with the win, especially when they were able to get that touchdown to go up 4 against Ohio State. Sam Hartman had been doing extremely well for Notre Dame now, albeit against, pretty weak competition, but they were still doing really, really well. And just the fact that they couldn't get it done was kind of surprising. I will say for Ohio State as well, Kyle McCord still doesn't look like the guy. Travion Henderson still doesn't really look like the guy for Ohio State. And it's crazy. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate that, buddy. It's crazy because of the overall, decline in Ohio State quarterbacks, from the fact that they had JT Barrett, then they get Dwayne Haskins, then they, get Justin Fields, then they get CJ Stroud. Now they have Kyle McCord with probably one of the most talented receiving cores that they've had in a long time. I mean, don't get it twisted. They've had really talented receiving cores for a good long while. But the fact that you have 2 of the top wide receivers in the entire nation still on your team coming back for another season speaks volumes about Ohio State, and the fact that they're just not able to capitalize on it is just kind of baffling. Hartman actually did have a pretty decent game. He was 17 to 25, 175 passing yards and a touchdown. The other thing that really surprises me is the time of possession. Notre Dame had the football for almost 10 minutes more than Ohio State did, had 22 first downs as compared to 19, and unfortunately couldn't come away with the win. The other weird thing is the fact that the last two plays, Notre Dame only had 10 players on the field instead of 11. I know they asked Marcus Freeman about it, and he basically responded with, well, we have to get better. How do you really fix that though? Because I mean, that's kind of football 101 of you got to have all of your guys out on the field. I know they asked if, why didn't you try to get another guy on the field? And his response was they didn't have a timeout to burn to be able to do that. Not only that, they didn't want to try to, potentially get penalized because they didn't put another defensive lineman out there as they, running on as they were getting ready to start the play. So a lot of mismanagement by Notre Dame. I think this year is going to be better for them as compared to last year. And the fact that they did take technically the number 6 team in the nation down to literally the last second for them to run in a touchdown says a lot to Notre Dame's credit on their defense. It's just unfortunately that they weren't able to come away with the win. Now, does this mean that Ohio State is still national contenders? I still think this is an ugly season for the Buckeyes. I think that they are still overall good enough to be able to get, walk away with wins. But the fact that you're going to have to face Penn State, who offensively is going to be better. Drew Aller's got a lot more chemistry. He's looking better than Kyle McCord is. They're going to have a better run game than Ohio State is. Defensively, they're probably going to be a lot better. And even if you look at last year with C.J. Stroud, all the way up until basically the fourth quarter, Penn State was right there with Ohio State the entire time. Ohio State's defense is actually what bailed them out last year. And this is with a very prolific C.J. Stroud ran offense. Then they're, of course, still going to have to face Michigan again. And I mean, for all intents and purposes, Michigan is still rolling the way Michigan has been rolling. They still have J.J. McCarthy. They still have Donovan Edwards. They still have Blake Corum. Like, this is going to be an ugly year for the Buckeyes. I could very easily see them getting 2 losses this year, both from Michigan and Penn State, unfortunately. So I don't necessarily see them being national contenders. The fact that they beat Notre Dame does say a lot because this is a pretty decent Notre Dame team. Now, albeit Notre Dame really hasn't faced anybody of true competition other than Ohio State. They faced Navy. They beat them pretty wholeheartedly. They faced Tennessee State, beat them pretty wholeheartedly. Central Michigan, their best win was at North Carolina State. They won 45 to 24. Then they faced Duke, Louisville. Then they faced USC, Pitt, Clemson, Wake Forest, and Stanford. So I don't necessarily know if I see Notre Dame really being able to do enough to go into the playoffs, especially with a loss to Ohio State, considering, again, I don't expect Ohio State to do that well, considering the fact that their offense just does not look like it's clicking with Kyle McCord at the quarterback. And I'm not saying that the backup is going to do any better. They've said all throughout training camp, it's neck and neck, and it's not neck and neck in a good way. They're making the same mistakes, just who's making the least amount of mistakes, which is bad if you're Ohio State, considering the level of quarterbacks that you had at one point as compared to what you have now. One thing I do want to talk about, because it was brought up, and I've talked about this before a lot on this show. I've talked about it a lot on other shows as well. There is rumors, again, keyword rumors, that the ACC intends to be notified by Florida State, North Carolina, and Miami that they are going to not Miami, Clemson, Florida State, and UNC, University of North Carolina, are all going to leave the ACC, and they're going to notify them as early as this coming October to do so. I don't necessarily believe this is true, that they can notify them all they want. I mean, technically they can notify them at any time they want to leave or they're going to leave. They just don't have to I'm not sure if they have to actually give them a date of when they're going to leave. I know I've broke this down on the show before on the reason why they're not going to do that. The buyout is going to be absolutely insane for their media rights in order to leave that grant of rights deal. I do believe over 50% of the schools in the conference would have to agree to terminate the grant of rights, which I don't believe is going to happen, because if you look at it, you have really, four big fish in the ACC. You've got Florida State, you've got Clemson, you've got North Carolina, you've even got Miami. Those are pretty much your four big fish in the ACC that if they decide that they want to leave, those are the guys that are going to be able to do it, and they'll be accepted by another big time conference. Everybody else is basically left by the wayside. You're you're gonna have NC State's going to be left by the wayside. They're not going to vote for that because, okay, where does NC State go? Duke would probably be taken just because of their basketball program, but football is king here. So would a conference be willing to take them in football wise just to kind of compensate for the basketball part? More than likely. Then you have Virginia, you have Virginia Tech. Again, decent basketball schools, not the greatest in football. You've got Boston College probably isn't going to go to another conference that they're not going to be highly sought after. Syracuse, another very good basketball school, may or may not get picked up for football as well to kind of compensate. So all of these schools that are in the ACC right now, they're not going to vote for this to go through just so Clemson, Florida State, and UNC can leave. They're just not going to do that. Not only that, it limits them honestly to only one potential exit, and that's to the Big Ten. Now, of course, geographically, where a lot of them want to go, where a lot of rumors have heard they want to go to the SEC. I get it, and more than likely they would. However, the problem is the current ACC media rights deal is with ESPN already. So why would ESPN basically bet against themselves, let them out, and then they have to renegotiate with the SEC to basically try to get them more money, because these schools are going to want more money at the end of the day. And this is the funny part is, so say hypothetically all of this goes through, Clemson, Florida State, and UNC all go to the SEC hypothetically, they're probably going to have to take less money than what they're making right now, because they're not going to be able to get a full media share rights deal until, years down the road as it gets closer to having to renew anyway. So that's kind of the crazy part. Now, they could potentially try to make a jump to the Big Ten, but I foresee a lot of legal issues with that, as far as battling with ESPN for the overall rights against Fox. And while the Big Ten, I could see it to expand and especially kind of have an even tighter hold on the college sports world, I really don't see that happening. We've heard about this pretty recently with the Pac-12 essentially dissolving, all of those teams leaving as of coming next year. We've heard a lot of the, Florida State is extremely unhappy in the fact that they're stuck in the ACC, the fact that the deal is through 2036. They're not making as much money as teams in the SEC and the Big Ten. And I say this, I really, really caution, the ACC from doing this, and this, more specifically those teams from doing that, because you look at what happened with the Pac. The Pac-12 was under the assumption that there's going to always be more money in the pot. There's going to be more money contracts out there for them to take, and that ended up not being the case. And now we have the Pac-2, while the rest of the conference has been decimated and is, of course, moving on to other conferences. So I would strongly, strongly urge, Clemson, UNC, Florida State, take your time, see if you can potentially work out a deal with another conference if you're going to try to go that route of, hey, Big Ten, will you take all of us? Hey, SEC, will you take all of us? Is there something we can do? Maybe they could even negotiate with ESPN directly of, okay, look, we want to move to the SEC. We're going to stay in the SEC. You already have, a contractual tie with the SEC. Can we kind of, blend and merge those together? Keep what we have, kind of keep what we have now, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, if that means we can get out of this early type thing. That way ESPN isn't kind of fighting against themselves. But we will see if that's going to actually be the case or not. I really don't know. It's interesting. I heard that and I thought it was absolutely crazy that all of these teams, they still want to leave. We all know that because they want the most money, but just the way they're trying to go about it is insane. And I actually saw another comment that I kind of agreed with. Until I see ESPN or Fox or somebody like that reporting that the ACC, is going to potentially dissolve because of Clemson, Florida State, and all them wanting to leave, or they are going to notify that they're going to leave, I really don't believe it. Obviously, there is, fire to the smoke that's being put out with the rumors. I just don't see it happening right now. It's too much of a legal mess, and it financially, I don't think it's going to really work out in anybody's favor if they try to pull the plug on this too early. I just don't see it. But we will move on to the NFL though, and we're going to move on to the JETS, the Jets. Now, I actually talked about this with Pride last night on ASAP with the boys, kind of late at night, in case anybody didn't get to see it. And there is a report out there that the Jets locker room is ready to implode, that is under complete and total turmoil because Robert Saleh is quote unquote loyal to Zach Wilson, and Zach Wilson has not been playing up to par at all. He's actually regressed extremely bad. And of course, the Jets are now 1-2, having dropped their last 2 games to the Cowboys and the Patriots. So, are the Jets cursed? I think that they are. I mean, this is a franchise that has been cursed for an extremely long time, long before this has happened. Ever since Joe Namath left, this has not been a great franchise. Joe Namath didn't even finish his career with the Jets, if that gives you any idea of how this organization is run and how this organization has been. I said this to Pride last night, and it's probably going to come off a little bit controversial. And it's also going to come off bad because for anybody that does watch the show, everybody knows I am a massive Aaron Rodgers hater. If you don't watch the show, FYI, I am a massive Aaron Rodgers hater. I'm going to put some of the blame on Aaron Rodgers, but not for anything he's specifically done to affect the team, as far as I know. I'm calling it the Aaron Rodgers effect. And the reason why I'm calling it the Aaron Rodgers effect is it's similar to what Deion Sanders has done with Colorado. All the star power that he's brought, everything that he's been able to do business-wise, how successful he's been in life so far, has really made up for a lot of the down parts and the bad parts that Colorado has. Same with Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. Aaron Rodgers comes to the Jets, who already have a bad offensive line. They've had a bad offensive line for a long time. That was one of their number one issues. They did not fix it during the draft. They did not fix it during free agency. They have not fixed it at all. They have an over 40-year-old tackle in Dwayne Brown. They have Mekhi Becton, who's young. He's talented, but he can't stay on the field. They have Elijah Vera Tucker, who they drafted 2 years ago. Very talented, very good. Again, a little bit of injury history. They got Lincoln Tomlinson from free agency a couple years ago. He's in his 30s, also injured. And then Connor McGovern at center, who isn't terrible, but he's also not a top center by no means. So when Aaron Rodgers comes to the Jets, everybody's okay. The Jets are an automatic favorite. He's going to be able to overcompensate for a bad offensive line. Yes and no. We've seen the best of quarterbacks. It's hard to try to overcompensate and cover up for a bad O-line, because when you don't have a good O-line, you can't throw the ball, you can't run the ball. It's hard to be successful when you do that. And now your defense has to be on the field more. Your defense gets torched because your offense can't, keep the ball for longer than 2 minutes. So I'm calling it the Aaron Rodgers effect. The fact that everybody overlooked their offensive line being absolutely terrible. When I talked to Pride about this last night, there is a website, and I can't remember it off the top of my head. I'll have to see if I can find it before the show ends. I think it's lineups.com. They have the Jets offensive line ranked at 27th. And before the season started, before everything happened with Aaron Rodgers, they had them ranked at 27th, and they're 27th currently. And that's with, Dwayne Brown going on injury reserve. Mekhi Becton is questionable. Lincoln Tomlinson's questionable. Elijah Vera Tucker actually moved to right tackle against the Patriots. He's a little bit banged up. This is something that has been bad. And don't get me wrong, there's only so much you can do trying to cover up for Zach Wilson. He doesn't have a good offensive line to work with. Yes, he still has Garrett Wilson. Awesome, but he can't. But, Zach keeps forgetting the plays. He has Alan Lazard, who I'm not a massive fan of. He's a okay number 2. I really don't even consider him like a strong number 2. He's just an okay number 2. You've got an aging Randall Cobb there. Tight end wise, they're not bad. And I mean, defensively, they're solid. You've got Breece Hall on running back, but he's now questionable. He's injured. You got Dalvin Cook, who, for all intents and purposes, Dalvin Cook's not bad. He multiple 1,000-yard years, Pro Bowler, scrimmage yards. He's great. But we saw against the game against Dallas, he's fumbling the ball. He can't get going. He can't get started. So the Jets as a whole are a mess. And with Aaron Rodgers there, that hit all of that. The Jets have not had a good offensive line in an extremely long time. The Jets haven't had a good offensive line since, I would honestly argue, 2009, 2010, when they went to the AFC Championship game back-to-back years. They lost, but they were able to go. And they were able to go with a big offensive line that they could hand the ball off to LaDainian Tomlinson. Mark Sanchez could be a good game manager. And defensively, they could smother you and keep the games close. They haven't had an offensive line like that since. And it's going to be an issue. It's continuing to be an issue. Now, who's to really blame for this? Is it Aaron? Is it Zach? Is it Robert? Robert Saleh? Who is it? I'm going to give about 60% to the Jets GM and Robert Saleh, because they did not address this. They knew this was an issue coming in. The fact that they believe that the quarterback is going to absolutely fix a bad offensive line is insane to me, because we all know that's not going to happen. And the fact that they think that he could overcome that is also crazy. I am going to place about 20% of the blame on Zach Wilson, because you couldn't ask for a better time. The first few years you're in the league, you didn't really have much to learn from, as far as, yes, you had Joe Flacco on the roster to kind of learn from, but you're getting Joe Flacco way at the end of his career. Now he's just a journeyman backup after having been a pretty good starter for Baltimore. Now he's just a journeyman backup. That's not really much to learn from as far as, quarterback experience goes. You've gone through multiple offensive coordinators. Now you have Nathaniel Hackett. I am not saying Nathaniel Hackett is a good offensive coordinator at all. He is absolutely terrible. I don't care what anybody says. I know everybody's, oh my God, they got Nathaniel Hackett. You don't get a quote unquote good OC from a guy that calls plays for a quarterback that's already considered a generational talent, who already went to multiple NFC championships, who already won a Super Bowl without you. You didn't make Blake Bortles look any better when you were the offensive coordinator for the Jags. That defense carried you to an AFC championship against the Patriots. You didn't look good then. You went to the Packers. You got carried by Aaron Rodgers and Matt LaFleur. Then you become the head coach of Denver, and it showed that you were an absolute mess. Now, albeit Denver is also a mess, but you showed that you absolutely cannot coach. You cannot call plays. You cannot manage anything. Why you even still have a job as an offensive coordinator is beyond baffling, and it's only because Aaron Rodgers advocates for you. So I give Zach a pass in the fact of that offensive coordinator thing is crap, and I feel bad that he has to try to learn from him. And then again, because I'm a hater, I'm going to give about 20% to Rodgers and the Rodgers effect, because again, for everything that I give crap to about Aaron Rodgers, especially when it comes to weapons, he always had a pretty good offensive line in Green Bay. He had David Bakhtiari. You had the center there for a long time that was really good, that actually ended up going to the Chargers, and unfortunately has also been hurt. He almost always had a pretty decent offensive line. Even if they were injured or those pieces were out, they were able to find guys to fill in that worked out pretty well. And the fact that he didn't at any point go to Robert or go to the Jets organization, basically like Brady did, say, look, this offensive line is crap. You need to draft somebody. We need to go get somebody in free agency. We need to make trades. We need to do something to make this happen. And he didn't, is crazy. So it's a long season for the Jets. I think obviously this is going to be Zach Wilson's last year with the Jets. Depending on what Rodgers wants to do, this may or may not be Robert Saleh's last year. If Aaron wants to come back, probably saves him for one more year. If not, I honestly see this being, Robert Saleh's last time being, not his last time being a head coach. He'll probably be a head coach again somewhere. But this will probably be his last year in New York if Aaron doesn't come back to play. So It's going to be a long year, Jets fans. I'm sorry. It's going to be a long year. But we'll kind of end on a high note. We're going to talk about this weekend's college football games and NFL games, kind of the big ones that I think is going to be interesting. I already talked about college. Utah at Oregon State, USC at Colorado. You've got Kansas at Texas. You've got LSU at Ole Miss. Some pretty good Notre Dame at Duke. So pretty decent matchups. Pretty excited to see. For the NFL, obviously tonight on Thursday, we have Detroit at Green Bay. I'm excited to see that. Of course, for again, anybody that watches the show knows I'm not the biggest Green Bay fan. Always love to see Green Bay take an L. Still not completely sold on Jordan Love either. Just absolutely not a fan. Just because there's absolutely no way in the world that Green Bay drafted 3 quarterbacks, quote unquote future Hall of Famers at quarterback, and he's only completing 53% of his passes. The only quarterback doing less than him, and that like poorer in that category, is Zach Wilson. Now he's throwing a lot of touchdowns, which is good, and they've won 2 games, which is good. But he also had to get a win against a Saints team who was smothering them 17-0 until Derek Carr got hurt, and then Green Bay was able to march back because the Saints couldn't move the ball offensively. So it'll be interesting. I'm really rooting for the Lions tonight. I think the Lions will take home the win. It is in Lambeau. It is in Green Bay, but it's going to be a pretty decent night, so you don't have to worry about the frigid chills. And I honestly see Detroit coming away with the win. They did pretty well against the Falcons. They're rebounding from that Seattle loss. They're still probably riding the high of the first win against the Chiefs. So excited to see. I'm trying to look at some of the other either bad or good matchups for this coming weekend. Unfortunately, we do have Denver at Chicago, probably the game that hardly anybody is interested in unless you're a Broncos or Bears fan. One of these teams is going to get their first win of the season, which is going to be fantastic. I'm hoping it's Chicago. It's really kind of surprising that Denver has been as bad as they have, especially with Miami having hung 70 points on them just last week, is insane. And I would honestly believe, and I'm going to say it right now, if the Broncos don't improve by the bye week actually not even by the bye week, by the trade deadline, I definitely see Russ getting benched and Sean Payton saying, look, we have to pull the plug. We've got to find something else. The Russ experiment is not going to work, which is going to be crazy because of where Russ started out at. The fact that they got him, they believe they were a quarterback away, and realistically, it looked like they were just a quarterback away, and then it's gone. So it will be really interesting to watch. We do have Miami at Buffalo. This is going to be Miami's first real big test. Buffalo hasn't looked the same, but Buffalo is pretty decent. They're also one of their divisional rivals. So I think overall, this is probably going to be a pretty tough game for Miami. But it'll be interesting to kind of see what Josh Allen is able to do, and can Miami's defense, make as big of a statement as their offense has so far. So that'll be a fun game to watch. Then of course you have New England at Dallas. Dallas rebounding from that, pretty shocking loss against Arizona. I will say, as a Cowboys fan, and even as a objective individual, Arizona's a lot better than what people give them credit for. This is an Arizona team that every single game they played against Washington, against the Giants, and against Dallas, they were in the game every single time. Heck, look at one point last week against the Giants. They were up like 28-3 or 21-3, something like that. They had a pretty sizable lead against them. And, the Giants ended up storming back, so they just made bad decisions at the end of the game. But this is a Cardinals team that, while they're not overall talented, I don't see them going very far. They're competitive, and they're a lot more competitive than what people expected them to be. Obviously, it caught Dallas off guard. Arizona faces San Francisco, so I don't see that. I see this as truly being Arizona's first non-competitive true loss. But good on Arizona. Dallas doing typical Cowboys things, unfortunately. It will be interesting to see if Dallas's offensive line is going to be able to do any type of decency especially against New England's pass rush. New England has always had a phenomenal defense. You've got Matt Judon on that side. Christian Gonzalez looks like a fantastic rookie for New England so far. And Dallas's offensive line got absolutely bullied by Arizona last week. They couldn't hardly do anything offensively with the ball. So it'll be interesting to see, can Dallas come away with the victory, especially against a New England team that also struggles as far as being able to move the ball offensively. A lot of questions with Mac Jones, a lot of questions as far as running the ball with Stevenson and Elliott. And Elliott's a return game to Dallas since having been cut. So it's going to be an interesting weekend. College football, it's heating up. I can't wait to watch more of it. Same with the NFL. There's so many interesting stories. Unfortunately, so many unfortunate injuries for a lot of great players that we've been able to watch. Nick Chubb is injured, Trayvon Diggs is injured, Aaron Rodgers got hurt very first night. So it's going to be really fun to watch this. Watch the season unfold. We're still early in. There's a lot that can still happen, a lot that can still change. But I'm excited. It's going to be fun to watch nonetheless. Everybody, please like, share, and subscribe. If you don't mind, you can follow me on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram and TikTok, all at Inside the Hoosier Mind. Same thing for anywhere you get your podcasts. You just look for Inside the Hoosier Mind. You'll be able to find me. And on X, formerly known as Twitter, you can find me at Hoosier Mind. Appreciate everybody interacting, all the love and support. I will be back next week from Arizona to kind of go over what happened this coming weekend and whatnot. But everybody have a good night. And as soon as I find my exit video, peace.